whispering "Dad." Just a hint. Mom catches it. My voice quivered, fragile as the breeze slipping through a door's narrow crevice. My throat constricted, each syllable emerging with immense effort, as though I were stifling a torrent on the verge of breaking free. My heart thundered within my chest, threatening to shatter. Instinctively, my hands gripped the blanket tighter, knuckles paling under the strain. My breaths became erratic, sharp, shallow, and sporadic. In the hush of the room, every tiny sound sent my pulse racing, terrified that this clandestine truth would be unveiled to the world. Greetings, everyone. I'm Kopi. Today, I'm sharing a chapter of my life, a chapter one once vowed to conceal forever, never to speak of again. The most agonizing part is that I am the one to blame. It's a tale that feels ripped from the pages of a fiction novel, something that should only unfold on the silver screen, yet it transpired in my reality. Despite my efforts to erase it from memory, the events linger, etched deeply in my mind, haunting me with each passing day. I fear I'll never atone for my mistakes, nor find peace with the person I've profoundly hurt. The scars I left behind aren't just emotional. I shattered the foundation of trust itself. No matter how tirelessly I attempt to make amends, I can't undo what I've done. I'm a young woman residing with my parents in the quaint town of Carmel by the Sea, California, a place where tranquility and poetry intertwine. My father, Gage, runs a renowned seafood restaurant in the area. He meticulously maintains his physique, a gym enthusiast who, despite nearing 50, boasts a body that remains toned and robust, defying his age. He embodies strength and decisiveness, yet his demeanor with me is always tender and kind. Yisa, my mother, graces the classrooms of the nearby high school as a passionate literature teacher. Her presence is a blend of gentleness and elegance, with a profound affection for classical literature that radiates from her every gesture. Each night, she finds herself nestled by the window, immersed in the pages of a beloved book under the comforting embrace of warm lamplight. Amidst her literary voyages, she never overlooks the moments to shower me with heartfelt advice and boundless love. It was she who taught me the art of living with authenticity and deep emotion. From the innocence of childhood to the complexities of adulthood, I have been cocooned in the unwavering love of both my parents, who have poured their hearts into nurturing and protecting me. In my early years, the sound of my father's return from work was a beacon of joy. I would dart towards him, throwing myself into his strong embrace, my tiny arms winding around his neck in a tight hug. To me, my father was the epitome of safety and comfort. Within his arms, the world felt right, and all worries melted away. I didn't ponder deeply, I simply reveled in the sheer feeling of being loved and secure. A free-spirited soul, I was always enchanted by beauty and freshness. I took delight in selecting the most exquisite and vibrant dresses from my collection, twirling gracefully before my parents, eagerly awaiting their approval. Their eyes would sparkle with pride as they greeted my spins with warm smiles and sincere compliments. Those simple affirmations, filled with love and pride, made me feel like the happiest girl in the universe. Every stitch of fabric, every heartfelt word from my parents, wove together the tapestry of my cherished memories. Their unwavering support and tender love have been the foundation upon which I build my dreams, forever grateful for the sanctuary they have provided me throughout my life. Every evening after dinner, our family would gather around the TV, and I developed a cherished ritual sitting on my father's lap. He would envelop me in his arms, those embraces tender and warm, creating a sanctuary of comfort. This nurturing became so ingrained in me that letting go felt nearly impossible. Even as I transitioned into adulthood, I clung to this habit, clinging to the remnants of my childhood where I remained the little girl seeking love and protection in his steadfast embrace. This gesture was more than routine. It was a bond, a simple joy I never wanted to relinquish. Lately, however, sitting on my father's lap or rushing to hug him no longer feels the same. There's an unfamiliar tension in his responses that I can't ignore. His once effortless acceptance of my hugs now comes with a hesitation, his arms sometimes tightening more than usual. The warmth in his gaze has shifted, replaced by a subtle confusion that hints at secrets he's keeping from me. It's as if the gentle and loving father I knew is now concealing something beneath his composed exterior. In these moments, my heart races, driven by an intuition whispering that something is amiss. I sense the wrongness, yet a part of me refuses to believe it. Perhaps I'm overthinking, or maybe it's just a fleeting unease. Regardless, this sense of abnormality clings to me, altering the simplicity of our interactions and casting a shadow over what once felt so natural. My father, ever the epitome of strength and charm, maintains his vigorous lifestyle with dedication. Despite his age, he possesses a physique that's both strong and stylish, reminiscent of his younger days. To me, he's not just a father, but a paragon of resilience and allure that I've always admired. His broad shoulders and toned frame remain undeniably handsome, and every time he moves through the room, a wave of fondness washes over me, a complex emotion I struggle to define. Perhaps it's his unwavering confidence or the powerful presence he carries that continues to remind me of the childhood days when he was my entire world. Yet, beneath this admiration lies a growing unease, a silent question about the changing dynamics between us. The man who once symbolized unwavering safety now holds secrets that distance us, making me yearn for the simplicity of our past while navigating the uncertainties of our present. Recently, something about my feelings toward Dad had shifted. It wasn't the simple admiration of a daughter for her father anymore. It was something intangible, an inexplicable undercurrent I couldn't name. I'd catch myself staring at him longer than I should, a peculiar sensation stirring within me whenever he was near. One day, like so many others, I came home from school. Dad was already there, as he usually was, always beating Mom home, sitting on the sofa with his gaze fixed on the TV. The sight was ordinary, yet comforting in its familiarity. I stepped inside, and there he was. Without a second thought, I dashed toward him, just as I did when I was a little girl. It felt so natural, almost instinctive, to jump onto his lap. I settled there, expecting the same warmth I'd always known. Dad hugged me back like he always did. But this time, something felt off. The embrace was warm, yes, but the air between us was different, charged, heavy, unfamiliar. I brushed the discomfort aside, blaming it on overthinking. Surely, it was just me being silly. But then, as I sat there, something peculiar caught my attention. It was subtle at first, like a fleeting nudge. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself it was nothing more than an awkward sitting angle or a stray object in Dad's pocket. Yet, the longer I stayed, the more undeniable it became. My pulse quickened. The atmosphere, once cozy, now felt stifling and claustrophobic. I tried to steady myself, forcing calm into my unsettled thoughts. But unease gnawed at the edges of my mind, persistent and unyielding. I glanced at Dad. His eyes mirrored my own, uneasy, uncertain, and silent. Neither of us spoke. We just sat there, trapped in an invisible tension, until the front door creaked open. Mom's arrival shattered the spell. I wanted to leap off his lap, but my legs felt anchored, refusing to cooperate. Dad remained still, his gaze locked on mine. And in that moment, I couldn't find the warmth I once knew in his eyes. The room felt colder, heavier, as if something fundamental between us had shifted. My mother's presence brought an end to the quiet, but it couldn't erase the unspoken change. Something had cracked, and there was no turning back. We both quickly averted our eyes, the silence between us stretching like a taut string. I stood up abruptly, forcing myself to act as though everything was perfectly normal. But the weight of that strange feeling lingered, pressing heavily on my chest. It was as though an invisible line had been crossed, leaving no way to return to the simplicity of before. On the surface, life went on as usual. But beneath it all, something unspoken had changed. Dad seemed more attentive, almost too attentive. He began noticing small details about my life, things he'd never paid attention to before. He'd ask about my day, linger in conversations, and, to my surprise, started buying me gifts, clothes, trinkets, things I hadn't even mentioned wanting. At first, I thought it was nothing, maybe just a phase, a newfound interest in my well-being. But the more it happened, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't fatherly affection. The gifts, the lingering moments, his gaze that seemed to hold something unspoken, it all felt different, unsettlingly so. The space between us wasn't just physical anymore. His eyes seemed distant yet searching, and the silences between us stretched longer, heavier. I could sense something shifting in the air, a current pulling us toward an unknown shore I wasn't ready to face. And then, that day came, the day the unspoken finally surfaced. It was a moment etched into my memory, vivid and impossible to forget. Mom had to leave for a business trip, her school's schedule demanding her presence elsewhere. That night, it was just Dad and me. I came home from school, expecting the usual routine, but as I stepped inside, I froze at the sight before me. The dining table, always cluttered and casual, was transformed. A lavish dinner spread awaited, flickering candles casting a warm glow, plates of aromatic food meticulously arranged, and 2 bottles of red wine standing proud like sentinels. I blinked, caught off guard by the scene. A nervous laugh escaped me as I looked at Dad. "What's all this?" I asked, my voice laced with surprise. "Why are you going all out tonight?" He met my gaze with his usual gentle smile, though there was something in it I couldn't quite place. "I just wanted to celebrate," he said, his tone light but deliberate. "I heard something good today, something worth a toast." I smiled back, brushing off the unease stirring inside me. To me, it was just a kind gesture, a thoughtful surprise. I couldn't see, not yet, that this was the beginning of something I wouldn't know how to handle. I was happy, genuinely so, and chose not to question anything. Tonight felt special, and I wanted to savor it. The dinner table was a scene of warmth and connection. Dad and I sat together, sharing the meal and sipping wine as the evening unfolded. The candlelight danced softly between us, casting a glow that made everything feel familiar, yet somehow different. At first, everything seemed perfectly ordinary. We ate, laughed, and reminisced. Stories from my childhood filled the air, tales of when I was the little girl who clung to my father's side, refusing to let go. Sweet memories surfaced, layered with jokes and playful banter that made us both laugh until our sides ached. It felt like the tension from before had vanished, replaced by something warmer, something that brought us closer than ever. As the wine flowed and our laughter echoed in the cozy room, I started to feel the effects of the alcohol. My thoughts grew hazy, my inhibitions loosened. The world blurred at the edges, and reason faded into the background. Somewhere between the empty bottles and the nostalgic glow, we drifted closer, as if drawn by some unseen force. Then, without warning, a question escaped my lips, a question I hadn't even realized was lingering in the shadows of my mind. "Do you like me?" The words hung in the air, their meaning unmistakable. It wasn't the innocent question of a child seeking reassurance from her father. No, this was different, heavier. It carried an undertone that my sober self would never have dared to express. Dad froze, his silence thick with unspoken thoughts. Slowly, he turned to me, his gaze deep and searching, as if trying to unravel the answer within himself. When he finally spoke, his voice was warm, yet weighed down by layers of emotion. "Yes," he said. That single word landed like a stone in a still pond, rippling through everything I thought I understood. The space between us seemed to tighten, charged with something I couldn't name, something that defied every boundary I'd known. My heart raced, an erratic rhythm fueled by the wine, the moment, and the rawness of emotions I couldn't control. I didn't know what drove me then, whether it was the wine's influence or the feelings I'd buried for so long. Without a second thought, I reached out, wrapping my arms gently around Dad's neck. The gesture felt both familiar and foreign, like crossing into uncharted territory, one step further than I'd ever imagined. A strange sensation coursed through me, unbidden and overwhelming. I couldn't stop, I didn't want to stop. My thoughts, once so carefully guarded, dissolved into the haze of the moment. All I knew was that I couldn't hold myself back any longer. Dad hesitated, just for a fleeting second, as though caught in a silent struggle. Then, his arms moved, wrapping around my waist with a firmness that left no room for ambiguity. He pulled me closer, closing the space between us until there was nothing left, no distance, no boundary, no turning back. In that moment, the world around us seemed to vanish. The room, the flickering candlelight, the weight of everything that should have been, none of it mattered. All that remained was the unspoken connection between us, raw and undeniable. Our eyes locked, ensnaring each other in a gaze that felt as infinite as time itself. Words became superfluous, our eyes spoke volumes, conveying a depth of emotion that language could scarcely touch. In that prolonged moment, a myriad of unspoken truths passed between us, each one acknowledged and accepted in the silent communion of our stares. Then, tentatively, our faces drew closer. The air between us charged with anticipation, our lips met a cautious, exploratory touch that trembled on the brink of forbidden territory. The initial contact was soft, fraught with the hesitance of uncharted waters, a gentle testing of limits we both felt but hadn't dared to define. But as seconds stretched into breathless eternity, our initial caution dissolved into a profound urgency. The kiss deepened, fueled by a mutual desire that swept us into its current. It was no longer a question of right or wrong, of boundaries crossed. It was an undeniable convergence, a fierce collision of emotions that enveloped us completely. Our embrace tightened, as if both of us were desperately trying to hold on to this forbidden moment, to preserve it as though it were the last thing that mattered. My heart thudded loudly in my chest, each beat a sharp reminder of the weight of what we were doing. The warmth of his touch seemed to drown out everything else, leaving only the sensation of his hands on my skin, the pulse of our connection. His hands, though tentative at first, began to move lower, tracing the contours of my back with a soft, deliberate motion. There was a hunger in the way he touched me, but it was restrained, careful as though every part of him was aware of the gravity of the moment. His touch, though gentle, held an undeniable desire that reverberated through me. Every gentle touch ignited a surge of sensation, like an electric current rippling through my body, awakening a hidden fire deep within. My breath caught, quickening, as I responded without thought, pulled by the warmth of his hands, the pressure of his embrace. It felt as though my body had already known what to do, acting on instinct before my mind could even begin to catch up. With a quiet strength, he lifted me effortlessly into his arms, carrying me toward the bedroom, where the only light came from the distant, pale glow of the outside world. The room seemed to fade into the background, the shadows of time and space falling away. In that suspended moment, there was only us, two souls bound in a connection so deep, so forbidden. It felt as if the universe itself had stopped, holding its breath. My father laid me gently on the bed, his lips finding mine again. The kisses grew deeper, more passionate, as if there were no turning back. His hands moved deftly, slowly unbuttoning my shirt. Each touch stripped away not just my clothes, but also the barriers between us. Vulnerability replaced hesitation, and all our reservations dissolved into nothingness. That night, we shattered every boundary that had ever held us apart. It was a night drenched in raw, untamed emotion where long-buried desire surged to the surface and a bond was forged that should have never been. We surrendered completely, not just in body, but in spirit. In those fleeting moments, we vanished into a world of our own, where nothing mattered except the two of us, lost in a reality that only we could understand. The morning arrived with a brutal wake-up call. My mother came home sooner than anticipated, her steps heavy with unspoken tension. The door creaked open, and there she stood, her expression a mix of shock and disbelief, as the unthinkable truth unfurled before her like a nightmare. In that instant, everything I had ever known, the family I thought was unbreakable, the sense of safety I had always leaned on, collapsed, leaving only fragments of what once was. My mother didn't utter a single word. She simply turned, her back to us, and walked out, leaving behind a silence so thick it felt as though it could suffocate. The days that followed were a blur of unbearable sorrow. My parents filed for divorce, and the family that had once been whole and full of life was now reduced to a mere shadow of itself. My father and I could no longer meet each other's gaze. The enormity of what we had done hung between us like a dark cloud, suffocating and relentless. I was left to wander through the wreckage I had created. The love I had taken for granted was gone, replaced by a gaping chasm of pain and regret. My father, once my unshakable pillar, now stood as a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. And my mother, who had devoted her entire existence to me, now carried a wound so profound, so irreversible, that no time could ever hope to heal it. I came to the painful realization that the choices I made, the emotions I failed to keep in check, had torn apart the people I loved most. The damage was beyond repair. There was no going back, no rewinding time to undo the harm I had caused. Now I stand at a crossroads, lost and uncertain, unsure of how to pick up the pieces and rebuild my shattered life. The family I once cherished has vanished, replaced by a painful, haunting memory. The road ahead is foggy, and I am left to face the consequences of my actions alone, with no one to blame but myself. To anyone listening to my story, I beg you to learn from my mistakes. Family boundaries exist for a reason. Once they're crossed, the damage is irreversible. No love, no desire, no fleeting moment is worth the destruction of trust and the irreplaceable loss of those who matter most. Thank you for hearing my story. If it resonated with you, I'd appreciate your support. Like, subscribe, and share. My hope is that my words serve as a reminder of the power of respect, self-control, and the consequences of losing them. Take care, and I'll see you in the next chapter.